Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to UMedTV. My name is Kemal Erkan. Today is November 3rd, 2023. As we started our political series in mid-summer, we are continuing to have more events, and today we have a special guest. So I was actually just updating my screen from this side. So our guest today is very special. She has been with us several times in the past, and she's one of the regular on this show. I'm thrilled to introduce a remarkable individual who is a true force for positive transformation. She has made a history as she's one of the first transgenders in the state of Delaware to be elected, and also in the nationwide. So Sarah McBride is a passionate activist, a dedicated public servant, and a symbol for resilience and hope. From her story, I'm extremely inspired. And she's still continuing to touch different lives as she's providing services. She's serving for Delawareans. Now she's getting ready for a bigger stage, and we are gonna listen to her plans, and hopefully she can answer many of your questions. And without further ado, I'm gonna take her back in. So, thank you. All right. Senator Sarah McBride is with us. Sarah, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me on again.
Well, it is our pleasure, and it's always fun when you join us. We have great conversations, and I appreciate for all of your support and what you do for Delawareans. So before we start, I'm going to try to play this video if I can find it very quickly. Sean is going to probably help me with this.
On your teams.
It's on the team. All right. So let's see. Is that the first one? No, here. This one. Okay. So let me just, if you guys can give me a second, and I do want to make sure that this reaches out to many people. No, Sean, it actually went to the. 1 second, let's see. I'm going to try one more time, and if it doesn't work, then I'm gonna so the downloading option is not working on this. So
it should be in your downloads.
It's on the download.
It's added as a background. Yeah.
Okay, so let's see.
You just go to your download.
Okay. It is, well, you know what, it's fine. So I can bring that back. So the only reason, Sarah, I wanted to do that is because I wanted to tell you that I told you so. So what that is a video from July 2021 event. And what I was telling you is that you were going to run for one of these big offices, and you were saying that it's not going to be soon, and I was saying that it is. And that just happened in the first like 2 years of that conversation, and I'm extremely proud of you and what you do individually from your state position, and I know that you will be a great congresswoman, and I do see even bigger positions in your future, and I do want to be there with you when you are going through those victories. So today, we are going to focus on your campaign for 2024. And As you follow what we do with these events, we try to bring everyone who is running for different positions. And it's kind of, from my point, I do take this very seriously and then try to be as independent as possible and objective as possible. And then, and so far we are able to manage that. When it comes to you, I may not be so maybe objective, but that's I think that's allowed, right? So now I want to start our conversation. I want to open our conversation with one of the issues that we always talk, but then we forget later on. We talk when this happens on the day off, or maybe next day, and then after that we forget. And I'm referring to the mass shooting problem in the United States. And every time this comes up, everyone who owns a gun, they're so defensive. And I own a gun personally. I have a concealed weapon license as well. And I never feel like I need to give up my gun when these things are happening. But there is this group who believe that gun control means that we have to give up our guns, rather than looking into this in a different way and more maybe efficient way to fix the problem. So I want us to address that with your campaign, what your plans are, but I also want to kind of hear what you have to say with these mass shootings and how this could be prevented, if it could be prevented. And also from the Delaware standpoint, is Delaware different than any other states? Are we ahead of the game, or we still need to adopt more policies? So it's on you now.
So thank you for asking that question. And it's certainly a question that I would say, in terms of the tangible, discrete issues that I hear about from voters, the reality of gun violence in our society is near the top of issues that comes up. And I know all of our hearts were broken with the news of the mass shooting in Maine that recently happened. But unfortunately, I don't think any of us were surprised to see another mass shooting in the news. It has become such a regular occurrence. But to your point, we can't let the fact that it's becoming a regular occurrence, or that has become a regular occurrence, stifle our outrage or undermine our sense of urgency in the need to adopt common sense gun violence measures. Measures that, to your point, majorities of Democrats, Republicans, and independents support, measures that even the majority, to your point, of gun owners support. And that the opposition to these common sense reforms is from a small group of well-funded extremist activists at organizations like the NRA. This is one of those issues where we know what the solutions are. We are the only country that sees the kind of gun violence that we see. And that's not because Americans are more violent or homicidal than people in other countries. It's not because mental health is that much worse in this country than other countries. It is because we are the only country of our size that lacks the kind of gun safety measures that in some cases we used to have in this country, and in the case of other countries that they have. That's legislation that ensures that everyone who purchases a gun has to go through a background check. It's legislation that bans assault weapons, because weapons of war, or slightly altered weapons of war to get technical, don't belong on our streets. I'm proud that Delaware has done a lot on this issue. There is more work to do, but we have done a lot. When I got elected in a wave of what are called gun sense candidates who support common sense gun safety measures. And we had gotten elected after the Delaware General Assembly, unfortunately, had not done enough on this issue. And after getting sworn in, the Delaware State Senate passed a number of gun safety measures. Unfortunately, those measures didn't get all the way through. And it took the Uvalde shooting, the Uvalde tragedy in that elementary school in Texas. It took for leaders like myself and Attorney General Kathy Jennings and leaders in both the Senate and the House to speak up and say, we have not done enough in Delaware. And fortunately, through the leadership of folks like now Speaker Val Longhurst, Senate Majority Leader Brian Townsend, Senate President Pro Tem Dave Sikola, Tizzy Lockman, Laura Sturgeon, so many people coming together. Within a month of the Uvalde tragedy, Delaware passed the most significant gun safety package in our state history. It included an assault weapons ban. It included a ban on high-capacity magazines. It included reforming liability shields that meant that gun dealers and gun manufacturers, even when they were negligent, even when they sold a gun to a person who they clearly knew should not be purchasing a gun in that moment, finally holding them accountable and saying the rules of our state apply when negligence is occurring in those environments. And so we were able to move that forward. And then just this past June, I'm proud that I was the Senate prime sponsor on bipartisan legislation that created gun-free school zones in Delaware, because up until that legislation was signed, if an individual brought forward a weapon into our schools, a gun into our schools, they had not done anything wrong until they shot someone with it. And so our bipartisan bill, former Speaker Schwarzkopf and I changed that and made Delaware truly gun-free school zones. But this is one of the reasons why I'm running for Congress, because the reality is, as much as we can do at the state level, we can't fully protect Delawareans until there is national action, because in a small state where weapons of war can come over state lines and into our communities very easily in literally a matter of minutes, we are not truly safe until Congress steps up, passes universal background checks, passes an assault weapons ban. And I'm going to be a voice in Congress that's saying now is the time. Last year was the time. The decade before was the time. We are long past time to pass these common sense measures that will save lives, and we know they will save lives.
So with this issue, Sarah, one of the discussions that I had last week, Sherry Dorsey Walker, she talked about the red flag regulation, and Maine did not have this, but Delaware has. And then she made reference to the healthcare and in inpatient mental institutions. They work with the law offices or with the police department, perhaps. But I didn't really understand. And then after that discussion, I went back to our social workers. As you know, United Medical Accountable Care Organization, we have in our central office, we do have nurses and other individuals who are part of the clinically integrated care that we are providing. But then social workers are key elements in terms of helping individuals who really need special attention. And one of the reasons that we always need them to reach out to these patients, those who are going through depressions, those who are going through different struggles in their life with social determinant of health issues. So, and one thing that I asked them, whether or not, if we ever ask the patients if they own a gun. Now, I'm going to put this in a different perspective for you, and I'm going to hear what your opinion on this is. So, for example, if we identify in our case conferences, someone present the patient, and once we know this patient has 3-4 different psych medications, and maybe they are not getting the best help that they need, would that individual be high risk if they own a gun, not just for the society, but for their own self-inflicted kind of harm that they can actually do? And I was thinking, why wouldn't we actually take advantage of that type of access that we have?
Yes. So, there's no question that red flag laws are part of the solution. I was part of the movement that pushed forward and advocated for the red flag laws, the safe storage laws here in Delaware that we have. They are absolutely a part of the solution. There is no question that folks who we have reason to believe are a risk to themselves or others, that they should not have guns. But we also have to be very careful too, when we're talking about red flag laws, to reinforce the fact that folks who are struggling with their mental health are far more likely to be victims of gun violence than they are to commit gun violence against someone else. That violence isn't in and of itself a mental health issue. Yes, mental health crises can exacerbate risk, certainly to oneself, and in some cases, risk to others. And that's why, red flag laws are an important part of the solution. But we also don't want to create a situation either where we're creating a disincentive to get health care because of the risk that a gun owner, for instance, would lose their gun. Because being someone who's struggling with their mental health does not in and of itself make you dangerous. And it's a fine line. We want to make sure we're nuanced. We don't want to have any of the unintended consequences of reinforcing stigma or creating barriers to care. But we do want to make sure that we have targeted policies in place, like Delaware's red flag laws, that really guarantee that if you are truly deemed to be a risk to yourself or others, that we ensure that you don't have access to the kind of firearms that can cause serious harm and injury to yourself and serious harm and injury and death to others as well. But it's part of the solution. It's not the entirety of the solution. And I think, look, stepping back, there's no question that when we're talking about gun violence and we're trying to make clear that we can't solve a mental health crisis and expect gun violence to disappear, that doesn't mean that there isn't a mental health crisis that we do need to address. There doesn't mean that there isn't areas of serious improvement that we need to make in improving parity when it comes to reimbursement for mental health care, in expanding support for providers so we're able to get more mental health care providers into our state. There are a whole host of elements in making sure that we are providing the mental health care that people need. But it's not going to be a silver bullet to connect mental health with gun violence more than we've already done, I think.
Fair enough. Now, my other issue with this mass shooting is how quickly we forget these things, and like media covers it for first 24 hours. Like after what happened in Maine last week, just 2 days ago in where our office is in Bear, a couple of blocks from here, there was a shooting. 3 people died. Some of whom were teenagers, young people, and we still don't know what really happened. And also, when I talk to some of our people in the office, they didn't hear about it. So I don't know if we get proper coverage for these types of issues either. Like so quickly we forget what happened, and then we just move on, and then no one wants to actually get involved or understand what's happening, or maybe help their own families or friends in some cases. I'm actually extremely disappointed the way the society is these days, where we so quickly forget and move on. What's your take on that?
Yeah. I was just in Dover yesterday, walking into a church for a forum, and as I was walking in, I was told that there had just been gunshots down the street. And I certainly know, I'm praying with everyone that was there that no one was harmed and no one was hurt, and I'm not sure what the outcome was. I was working in the Obama White House when the massacre in Newtown, Connecticut happened. And it was the first mass shooting in an elementary school. And it's horrific that I'm saying the first, that there has been others since. I remember walking through the hallways in the White House complex, and it was still in a way that it had never been still before. It was quiet in a way it had never been quiet, because everyone was glued to their televisions, watching the coverage, and ultimately listening to President Obama speak and address the nation with tears in his eyes, tears streaming down his face. And I think all of us thought that moment was going to be different. Now, gun safety advocates would tell you, rightfully, that we have made important progress at the state level on gun safety in the years since. And of course, President Biden recently passed a bipartisan gun safety package through Congress, the first time that that's happened since the 90s. But it is an outrage that after 20-something elementary school students were gunned down in their schools, that this nation didn't respond with the kind of meaningful action that their lives deserved, and that the lives that we've lost since deserved. As I said before, it is disturbing how frequent this has become, and therefore too often how numb society has become to this tragedy. And I think it requires all of us to treat this issue the way the family members of those who've lost their lives to gun violence treat this issue, because they don't forget, they don't move on. And I think all of us have to see their pain, feel their outrage, and join them in demanding action, and make sure that we don't forget that this shouldn't be normal. And the only way to make it not normal is for Congress to act.
I agree with you, and it should not be normalized, and that's the, I think, most dangerous thing. The only thing is with I'm always kind of like maybe more careful when I compare United States with any of the other parts of this world, just because our dynamics here, and being born and raised in Turkey, owning a gun is a very difficult process to do. But then it's different. Like I can tell you, like, I lived there for 24 years, versus here, especially in some places where, you know, it's pretty isolated. So I think I want people who are listening to us to kind of separate the issue of, like, you are not going out there to take people's gun.
Right.
It's just like what type of gun people should have from that point to,
and reasonable regulations on the process of purchasing a firearm. Yeah, I mean, look, and you're right, every country is different. And there are a lot of countries that have gun ownership culture that are not dissimilar from the United States, where they have passed these types of measures that we are talking about, right? Where handguns are legal, but there are reasonable restrictions around the purchasing of that handgun. Yes, where they have banned future purchasing of assault weapons. And when they take those steps, Australia, New Zealand, other places not too dissimilar from the United States, when they've taken those steps, gun violence drops. And so while no place is identical, there are lessons that we can learn. And, you know, we can't pretend like the United States is so unique that common sense and common experience can't be brought together to recognize that those policies will work here, because they have worked. The United States had an assault weapons ban from the late 90s into the 2000s, and mass shootings dropped dramatically. And when that assault weapons ban expired, because the Republican Congress didn't want to renew it George W. Bush didn't want to renew it, mass shootings increased. And so we can also just look here, we can look nationally, we can look state by state, where we know when these policies are implemented, gun violence drops.
I agree, and hopefully, you know, we'll find some more productive ways to fix these issues and address these problems. Now, I want to change gears a little bit. So there was a recent poll conducted in September 2023. So as you are running for the first, you have to go through the primary, and then you're going to be in the main election. And according to this poll, you are 44%, and you are followed by Eugene Young, who was with us, I believe, in August. He's 23%. And also Colleen Davis, she's at 13%, and she joined us in July. And these are your friends, right? So it's kind of like challenging part, which I ask usually everyone who are going to be part of the primary race. How are we going to overcome this issue? Because you have to win, and these are your people in the same party that you are serving together. What's the best approach, or what's your approach that you are going to have, or you are already taking? Especially now, you probably become a target because you are leading, right?
So we are a state of neighbors, and you know, so many of us know one another, and if we don't know one another, we're 1 or 2 degrees of separation. And in Delaware, politics is small too. So of course, we are going to be folks who have worked together, and yes, people who consider one another friends. I don't think elections are the first instance where two or more friends have applied for the same job. And that's really what has happened here. I have a great deal of respect for both of the other candidates who are running for this office. I've worked with both of them. I consider both of them friends. And I think, as we move forward, often what we see in Delaware politics is that we have a positive environment. And I think that's good, because this is a small state, and we see one another in the grocery store. We see one another at work. We see one another in our communities. And I think, there's a positive outcome of that, which is that it keeps our politics more positive. It keeps our politics more focused on what each of us brings to the table. And that's why I'm running. I'm not running against anyone else. I'm running because I believe that I am the best candidate to be Delaware's lone representative in the U.S. House of Representatives. I think now more than ever, we need people who know how to roll up their sleeves, dive into the details, bring people together, and deliver real and tangible progress. That's exactly what I've done in the Delaware General Assembly. It's what I've done already in my career as an advocate, where I actually helped to pass the first comprehensive civil rights bill in 3 decades through the U.S. House of Representatives in 2019 with a bipartisan majority. In the Delaware State Senate, I've taken on big issues like gun violence, like education, like paid family and medical leave and healthcare. And I've helped to move the ball forward, including passing paid family and medical leave, the largest expansion of the social safety net in modern state history, with bipartisan majorities. And so I believe that I have the record that proves that I'm someone who can go to Washington and do what might seem impossible, which is to make Congress work, to make it function. And I will also just add to this too, because I know this is something you and I have talked about in the past, that there's obviously increased attention on my candidacy, and I'm mindful of that. And what that means, though, is that just like was the case when I got elected to the state Senate as the highest ranking out trans person in the country, that there's going to be increased media and a unique microphone and platform. Delaware only sends one member of Congress to the U.S. House of Representatives. Other states get to bring together 10, 15, 20, 30 members of Congress to advocate for their state. We only get one, which means we need a member of Congress who has a unique platform, who has a unique microphone, and can make sure that the voices, the interests, the needs of Delaware are heard beyond a single voice. That I won't be a traditional backbencher in the U.S. House of Representatives, because I will have a platform and a spotlight that I can take and shine on the people of this state, the needs of this state, and help deliver the kind of jobs and investments that people up and down Delaware need.
One of the, I think maybe I should say this. So what I see, and because I was able to get to know you in the last couple of years a little bit more, although we had met apparently in the Jack Markell campaign back in 2007-8. But every time I talk to you, I hear this solid voice of, okay, I'm here to serve for people. I don't have this or that type of agenda. So, and these positions shouldn't be about what your gender or your identity is. It's about what you are planning to do and how you are going to serve. And I can easily say this, not just to you, but I always say this for everyone else when we talk about you. We don't just focus on one issue and only issue, which you can actually just bring that up and then get more, publicity in some way. And you don't do that. And I think I admire you for that. And I think most people, if they don't know you, they should watch our couple other episodes that we have done. Although, like in some of those, I try to push you to kind of, talk about some of the issues around the LGBTQ.
Yeah.
You said, and then I perfectly understand. Yes, I'll do whatever I need to say, what I need to do for that population, but I'm not here only for that population. That's really meaningful. That's important. I think that's probably also is your experience. So I know.
And if I just may briefly on that, and I promise to be brief on that, you're absolutely right. First off, voters care more about a candidate's ideas than they do their identity. And voters are more concerned with whether a candidate can deliver for them than they are a candidate's gender. And that has been my message throughout my time in public service, that I'm here to deliver on the ideas that I put forward in the campaign. And that's exactly what I've been able to do in the state Senate. It's what I'll do, even when political observers said it wasn't possible. And that's what I'll be able to do in Congress. And to your point, the most formative experience in my life has nothing to do with my identity. Was my experience serving as a caregiver to my husband, Andy, during his battle with terminal cancer, which is where so much of my passion around healthcare policy and policies like paid family and medical leave comes from, because I know how lucky Andy and I were to have a layer of support, to have that ability and time to care in the midst of a cancer diagnosis, ultimately a terminal cancer diagnosis. And I don't believe that time and ability to get care should be a matter of luck. I believe it should be the law of the land.
And I agree with that. And what I was, where I was going with this. So, I was asking Sean if he knew your age, but I was going to go with 32, 33. How old are you now?
33.
33, good. Sean didn't check his phone first time. But how old were you in the first time when you were in the Jack Markell campaign?
So I was, when I started, so the first campaign that I volunteered on, I was 13 when I started for Matt Dehn. And then I interned on Beau Biden's campaign in 2006. So I was 15, 16. And then when I worked for Jack, including having the highlight of my time with Jack was introducing Jack on the night he won the Democratic primary for governor, I just turned 18.
So the reason I'm asking, not to actually put you on the spot, but this is what young people need to actually see. When someone like you just didn't pop out from somewhere. You have been doing this for so many years. The experience is extremely important. That experience which makes you stronger, knowledgeable, and also understanding the society that we live in. Because what I see is like every time I see one of your social media posts, you are in one of those local events, right? That's not just you are trying to, I guess, I don't think it's just like the election related. It's just part of you. And this is not just happening overnight. So, and if someone who's been in some business for so many years, it's one thing. But if you've been doing this for 20 years almost from day one, and the last 15 years where you were actually almost professionally doing this, and have the reputation that you have today, I think those are extremely important. And you are a role model for many people. And I tell people to, get to know you and follow you to better understand what it takes to do it right. And I think you are one of those people. And for those reasons, maybe one of those times where I feel like I don't have to be so objective if I know that someone is much better than anyone else. This doesn't mean that they are not good people, they are. But if someone can serve in this position better, doesn't matter how old they are, if they have the right experience, if they have the right focus. And that will bring me to my next kind of question for you. Going from the state level to the national, so it's almost, I guess, like maybe the analogy of the college football to the NBA or like the NFL. So how are you preparing for that transition?
So fortunately, I'm no stranger to national politics and the federal government. I spent time working in and with the Obama White House. I served as the national spokesperson at an organization called the Human Rights Campaign, where I helped to lead the effort to pass the first comprehensive civil rights bill in 3 decades through the U.S. House of Representatives. I spoke at the 2016 Democratic National Convention, and President Biden was generous enough to appoint me to serve on the DNC Executive Committee a couple of years ago. And so I've been involved in that national federal space for a while, and gotten the experience to know that I'll be able to hit the ground running on day one in serving the people of Delaware, which again is so critical when you only send one person to Congress. Look, I think that my time in the Delaware State Senate too, though, has reinforced for me that there is opportunity to find common ground. My Republican colleagues in the Delaware General Assembly and I have very real disagreements. Some of them are as conservative as you come. But I also know that behind the headlines, behind some of the hot button issues that you and I often talk about and have great dialogue on, behind all of those issues, there's 80% of the iceberg of issues that Democrats and Republicans can find common ground on. They're important issues. They might not, appear on the front page of the newspaper, but they're important issues like combating lead poisoning among children, like expanding access to oral health care in rural communities, all issues that I've worked with my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to really take a big step forward on in both of those cases. And when you do that, when you build the level of trust and the relationships with your Republican colleagues working on those issues outside the headlines, it actually helps to buttress your capacity to work across the aisle on those issues that make the headlines, on the ones where it seems harder to find common ground because you have a pre-existing relationship and a level of trust. And that doesn't mean that every Republican is going to vote with me on certain issues. It doesn't mean that every Republican will be open to collaborating with me, but some will. And that's what I've seen in the legislature, and it's how I intend on operating in Congress.
Well, and I know you are going to do well anyway, so that you are ready for that transition. Now, let's talk about the little bit on the financial side and economics. We are going through tough times in this country these days. Economically, financially, people are struggling. Probably COVID-19 had a great impact on everyone, and we also got our portion, our right from that. Or whatever we need to take from it. And it's still happening. One of the issues that we see, people who already retired and they are going back to like some part-time jobs, so then they want to be able to afford their healthcare related expenses. Some people, they are struggling with their rent. Young people, they are struggling to own a house, because these days, when just to kind of put it in perspective, for a $300,000 mortgage, 3% interest rate versus 8% interest rate, that person is paying more than double these days, almost 70% more on the interest, and it becomes almost not affordable. And I'm always optimistic, but in this one, I don't see the light at the end of the tunnel just yet. So what is your take on that? What certain things that you are going to be able to do and hopefully help the situation?
Sure. I mentioned gun violence is one of the top issues that I hear about, probably the top issue, the number one issue that I hear from folks up and down the state is the cost of living, that the American dream is too often inaccessible and unaffordable. And whether it's the cost of housing, whether it's medical bills that are coming in, whether it's the fact that childcare for many families costs more than a mortgage itself. And of course, the price of daily needs like groceries and gas. It's breaking the bank for far too many families up and down our state. And we have to recognize that as elected officials, we have a responsibility to bring down the costs facing families. That's one of the reasons I will say why I prioritize paid leave, because getting a cancer diagnosis shouldn't result in losing your financial security because you have to give up your income. People are living in many cases paycheck to paycheck. And when you take time off work to get chemotherapy and radiation, you don't have the savings necessary to continue to pay your rent or your mortgage or put food on the table. And so paid family medical leave, for instance, is one of the prime examples of the kinds of policies we can pass to ensure that people have the breathing room necessary to get through inevitable life challenges and maintain their financial security. But there's so much more we can do. When it comes to housing, federal government should be putting more investments in affordable housing, both affordable housing in the context of subsidized housing, but also affordable housing for the great middle who don't get aid and support in purchasing a home, but who struggle to afford one nevertheless. There's no question that we have a housing shortage in this country. And so we need to be creative about how we make sure that we protect our open space and environment while ensuring that there is the kind of housing stock available to meet the demand, which helps to bring down the cost. That means more density in certain places. It means looking at our commercial areas and retrofitting them is and reclassifying them as multi-use so that we can have more living facilities and residential facilities in those places. I think when it comes to interest rates, I am cautiously optimistic that with sustained reduction in inflation, we will see interest rates decrease. I think the Fed and others are looking for sustained decrease in interest rates before they bring down inflation, before they bring down interest rates. But I'm cautiously optimistic that because of the progress that our economy has made already in the last year with things like the Inflation Reduction Act passed by President Biden and the decreasing inflation rate, that if that sustains, we'll see a decrease in the interest rates that we're seeing for mortgages. But I want to go beyond that because it's not just housing. Childcare is one of the top issues I hear about from people because right now, as I mentioned, for some folks, childcare costs more than a mortgage. And in some cases, it makes more financial sense for a parent to leave their job entirely to stay home with their child than to stay in their job and pay for childcare. That is ridiculous. Everyone loses out when people are forced, not by their own choosing, when they are forced out of the workforce because the financial incentives push them to do so. And so we have to pursue aggressively at the federal level investments in early childhood education to create affordable childcare and universal pre-K across our country, including in Delaware. And without federal investment, Delaware will struggle to meet that need and to achieve that goal. And so it's one of the reasons why it's a priority for me in my campaign and my service in Congress to bring in investments for early childhood education, because one of those cost of living issues I hear about is the rising cost of childcare. And the list goes on, but government has a role. We can responsibly spend in ways that help to maintain the support that families need, bring down costs that they're facing while not contributing to inflation. Build Back Better would have done that. And I think in 2025, those pieces that fell out, like universal pre-K, paid leave at the federal level, investments in home care and healthcare and housing, that we should pick those up and pass those and send them to a President Biden in his second term.
Well, I want to stay optimistic with everything that's happening globally. I am it's going to be a challenging time. So, and I want people to also kind of watch what they do and, maybe stay away from unnecessary spendings and then see if they can actually do a better budgeting, because some of those things are not going to come from the government. They're going to come from us, from the individuals and from the families. And if you don't have a good understanding from the individual standpoint, then we won't really have a good way to process how everything is coming to our way. And I'm hoping that maybe in the next 3 to 5 years, we would be in a better position. Now, let's talk about healthcare a little bit. Well, we are a healthcare provider, United Medical, ACO, United Medical. Now, United Medical ACO, from the Medicare Accountable Care Organization standpoint, MSSPs, we were for program year 2022, we were #1 in the state of Delaware, and for the nationwide, we were ranked 17 based on this savings ratio for the federal government. Well, Medicare expenditures are coming from our federal government, which is coming from our taxes. So I feel like we are doing our part to help the government to save money. Yet we still have a lot of challenges as a private organization, for a for-profit organization as well. So you and I, we talk about some of these issues in the past. We have to compete. We are competing with giant health systems. and we still have to do the same job, or in some cases we have to do it better because they can make things easier for themselves because they get different sources, different financials, different money from different places. So and healthcare is still one of the biggest item in terms of the state, in terms of the national level. The expense from the expenditure standpoint, almost 1/3 of the state budget, and I think it's pretty proportionate with the federal level. So this is a huge expense, and it requires a lot of changes. Yet we have also resource issues such as physician shortage, and trying to find new physicians, providers, opening new offices. Would like to hear your take on healthcare and what your plans are.
Sure. So I believe that in our lifetime, we can achieve universal coverage here in the United States. There's not one way to achieve universal coverage. Other countries have hybrid systems. Other countries have obviously single payer in certain instances. There are multiple ways of achieving universal coverage. And we took a huge step forward as a country with the passage of the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare. And I'm proud that President Biden continues to build on that progress, and that we've expanded, for instance, the ability of Medicare to negotiate for prescription drugs, a component of bringing down the cost of healthcare. But there's obviously more work that we need to do. I think we should continue to pursue strategies like lowering the age of eligibility for Medicare to cover more people. I think there are a whole host of reasonable next steps that'll help to push us closer to that goal of universal coverage and that are politically realistic. And I will be spending my time in Congress championing that goal of universal coverage, and I will pursue every common sense measure that brings us closer to that goal. But like you said, you can't begin and end the conversation around healthcare with just coverage. There's so many more pieces to the pie. There's so many more elements of the equation to bring down costs and ensure true access. Because you can have coverage, but if you have to drive 2 hours to get to the provider that you need, that's not a particularly practical option. And you shouldn't have to take that amount of time off to get even, in many cases, routine care. And so one of the top priorities I've had at the state level, and I'll continue to have this priority at the federal level, is to make Delaware a better destination for providers to live and work in. So, for instance, we've passed reforms to increase reimbursement rates in primary care, because we know that we under-reimburse in primary care here in Delaware. Everywhere under-reimburses, we particularly under-reimburse in primary care, which we know when we have more primary care providers in this state, and therefore make primary care more practical and accessible for people, that not only do we see reduced healthcare costs, we see improved health outcomes. I've worked a lot with my Republican colleagues on oral health care and reforming some of our licensure policies to open up pathways to practice here in Delaware. We've done loan repayment for healthcare providers in this state. And last year, we reformed the policies around physician burnout that so often meant that if you were a physician that pursued mental health care for yourself, that you put your license at risk. And we shouldn't be discouraging our caregivers to get the care that they, like everyone, need to live and to thrive. And so we reform those policies to maintain patient safety and appropriate regulation, while also opening up pathways for that kind of healthcare. One of the things I'd like to see us do, and I'd like to see a strong state and federal delegation partnership, is to fund and open up a medical school in Delaware to create that pipeline of providers in this state that I think would be a huge boon for Delaware's healthcare systems. And so I think there's a whole lot of exciting opportunities before us to expand access to care. We've made progress, but without federal action, we'll leave too many policies on the table.
Well, this position, and again, as you said, there's only one, but this position is has to deal with so many different issues, and like understanding of all these issues, it's not an easy one. But I do want to kind of, as we are approaching to the end of this, and we are going to bring you back because we have so many other questions, and I know timing is important, and also as we are getting closer to the election, we want to make sure that we have you back and address some of those. But one of my personal concerns is the issue around the freedom of speech. So as freedom of speech is a fundamental human right, and it's recognized and protected by many democratic societies around the world, right? So one of my issues is that as this is the idea of freedom of speech, where United States is one of the best examples, or used to be one of the best examples, where our First Amendment is protecting us, protecting every individual. And what I'm seeing these maybe several months or maybe last couple of years, having a different opinion almost is being penalized. Like, you cannot have an opinion. You have to think like me, or you have to think like this person or that person. And if you don't, and if I have the power, I'm going to ban you. I'm going to cancel you because you have an opinion that's different than mine. And this is endless I know it's a huge topic when we go into the freedom of speech, but I'm actually kind of seeing the hypocrisy of people or organizations and different maybe societies, how they just belittle others, or if they have power, if they have the legal power, they ban to think this way or that way. And I think this is extremely dangerous. And also because you're an activist and because you're a public servant and you went through a lot of things personally, and I wanted to actually kind of make sure that everyone also hears what you have to say on this. Do you see it the way that I'm saying? Actually, like, do you have the same concerns around the freedom of speech? And are some people taking this too far, where, well, you are not thinking like me, so you shouldn't have an opinion, boom, banned, like canceled?
So I think there's no question that we are seeing, in state legislatures, for instance, efforts to ban books, which is so incredibly dangerous and draconian and harmful. And so we've certainly seen an abuse of power, particularly at the state level in certain states, in trying to censor and limit discussion and limit discovery and limit conversation, and of course limit access to resources like books, simply because those politicians disagree with the topics in those books or the topics of conversations. So it's book bans, it's don't say gay, there's a whole host. You can't teach Black history in some places. I mean, this is an attempt by some people to try to paper over history, because they know that those who know history are less likely to repeat history, right? And if you're ignorant to history, you're doomed to repeat it. And I think they want history to repeat itself. But I think then when you stepping back too from that legal space, look, I do think that we have to become better at having conversation across difference in our society and across disagreement. Democracy only works if we can have conversation across disagreement. It's one of the things that I've really championed as a state legislature. Whenever I have a bill, I meet with the people who agree with me. I meet with the people who are undecided, but I also meet with the people who are vehemently in opposition to my bill. Because one, my values call on me to affirm the dignity of every person, and that includes people who disagree with me. And the simplest way to affirm a person's dignity is to show up and listen. And in some cases, people who you disagree with will teach you something, and you'll become better in your own thinking because of those conversations. They might convince you, and hey, you might convince them and get an unlikely ally. But, as someone who's been an advocate and now a legislator, I'm in the business of social change. And you can't create change, one, if there's no space and incentive to grow, My motto is always, I'll extend grace so long as you demonstrate growth. But for people to grow, you have to extend grace. People can't be permanently guilty for being wrong at one point, because that means there's no incentive for them to become right. And if we allow for the bonds between us to dissipate and disappear, then we cut off the capacity for us to open hearts and change minds, have conversation across difference, and move people. We can't do what we want to do if we're just going to talk with and engage with the people who are already on our side. If you want to engage in social change, if you want to make progress, that is hard work. And a lot of times that hard work requires difficult conversations. And so, you know, that's why I ran, because I like having difficult conversations, because I learn from difficult conversations. And because I know that the only way that we deliver hard-fought progress is to work hard. It's to have those hard conversations.
Just because it's difficult doesn't mean that we won't have those discussions or those debates. So as you said, like, we are going to learn from each other. And that's why we cannot limit, or we cannot frame these things in any way to limit the freedom of speech. And I'm hoping that we will see meaningful changes in the future, and the society is actually probably, hopefully, can stop the this kind of not really productive way of thinking and accepting each other. So, Sarah, I know we have a lot more to talk, but since you are going to be back, we can address some of those questions later on. But today is another important day for my parents. So it's their 57th anniversary, and my dad actually is a big fan of you. So,
oh my gosh!
So,
happy anniversary!
Thank you. So I will tell him, and then he does. I mean, he doesn't speak English, but he watches these events. So I'll tell him that you said hello, and I do want to congratulate them as well. So, well, the one and only Sarah McBride was with us. Thank you for joining us, and we appreciate everything that you do. I know you are going to do very well. And there are so many other positions that you are going to be taking in the future. You are going to be an extremely successful politician, and I know that you are going to serve the society that you live in, and we are here to help you in any way that we can, from United Medical Family standpoint, and personally from me. Sarah, thank you for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me. Always a pleasure.
Thanks. All right, well, we are going to have Mr. Donovan back in. So this was, all right, here's
Jamie?
the one and only Sean Donovan. So how are you doing, Sean?
Doing great. How are you?
Good, and this was a good conversation. I think Sarah is always good, but I think today she was even better.
Yeah, I think you know, having the campaign and obviously the elections upcoming in 2024, people who are already in politics and those who may be just trying to attempt to get their foot in the door now, you kind of have to be a lot more engaged and involved on what's going on in current times and making sure that you're up to date. But not only just following along, but also analyzing and predicting. That way you can actually have plans to, you know, have an impact on the future. So it's one thing to just follow along and say, oh, here's what's happening, but also to be able to analyze and then look forward. That way you can actually, you know, have some type of effective policy or other propositions that might impact what's going on.
Exactly. So I think she's going to do well. She'll be, of course, there's the primaries, and things are always challenging, and you can't take anything for granted. You have to work hard, and she's working really hard. Hopefully she'll do well. Now, I know we have a little bit of time left, or maybe not, but since we don't have the Bariatric Friday, I think we are okay. I do want us to, if I can do this time, so I do want us to play this video. And I'm going to share it from here.
Yeah, if you shared that with the audio, it should be able to transfer as well.
All right, so let's see, 1 second. Well, because I'm not a host on this here. Let's make this the host. Yep. So this actually, so this video is posted on our YouTube channel and also on Twitter. So because I'm on a different computer, it's a little bit challenging to do my regular shared screen. So, but I want people to watch this. And what we are talking about is the issue around what's happening in the Middle East, in Israel, in Palestine. And 10 years ago, in 2013, President Obama had this great speech, and he gave that one in Jerusalem to those who are probably not from Palestine. So they were actually Israelis in the audience. And the way that he's addressing what he was saying is probably, well, not only it's important, but it's extremely meaningful to better understand what's happening today in the Middle East. Because many people see this as like, well, this just started like 2 weeks ago. No, it didn't start 2 weeks ago. Mm-hmm. This is what happens when you put tremendous amount of pressure, almost inhumane conditions, putting so much pressure to not like 1 or 2 families, but 2.5 million people. Mm-hmm. And then yet you are assuming that this is the first time one side attacked the other side. That's not the case. And that's why the video is extremely important for those individuals to understand what this issue is, because many people, I'm going to actually, Sean, I didn't tell you this before this session, but Wednesday, one of my tennis team members. I'm not going to give his name, but he's a lawyer. And if he's watching it, then I know that he's watching it. So if he comes back to me and then tells you that I talk about him, so I know that he's watching these. But it was so disrespectful. And he came up to me and he said, well, you need to tell your president to shush, like just like this. I'm like, is he talking about Biden? Like he can't talk, like he's already having difficulties. Well, no, he wasn't talking about Biden. He was talking about President Erdogan. Well, I was born and raised in Turkey, but this is my home. Number one, well, 25 years is your age, and 25 years I've been here. So you don't have any more rights than I have, just because you were born here, right? That was disrespectful to assume that my president wasn't the president of the country that I live in. That's number one. Number two, like, shush for what? Telling the world that you need to stop killing kids, women, babies, men. Like, why is that wrong? Like, why would he need to shut up to please some lawyer here in the United States? Well, I was kind of like, I was kind of shocked the way that, well, he's a lawyer, right? Why would he, like, a lawyer should at least have some manners, because we are friends. We've been playing tennis for 12, 13 years. So wouldn't you have some respect to the other side? That's why I'm talking about this freedom of speech issue. So just because someone is thinking differently, you are gonna say that they are this or that. You can't label them like all Muslims are terrorists. No, everyone is based on the violence that we are putting on someone. It's outlaw or it's not. So you can't, remember we talked about this. Do we really hate violence, or do we hate the type of violence? So, like, remember that? So it's like, it's okay to just kill people as long as they are not on your side. That we disagree with. So, and that's why it's important for people to watch and do more reading and research to better understand situations when they are so limited. Because when I told them that Turkey was the first Muslim country recognized Israel as a state, he's like, oh, I didn't know that. Well, I'm like, dumbass, of course you didn't know that. That's why you are talking like that. So without that very little limited information that you have, you come up to me in a tennis game and then ask me to shut up my president, my former president, or maybe it doesn't matter. Like, just because you don't do enough reading, and then because you don't do enough reading, and because you don't have enough knowledge, you should shut up. So, and it was kind of like, it's also giving me a better understanding of people like Megyn Kelly, why she's so like crazy about Israel, and doesn't matter who's dying on the other side, as long as it's not from the Israeli side. And like, it shocked me that she was just totally shut down and didn't want to even hear anything from the other side. Doesn't matter. Like, so if you are not the same kind, you can die. That's how this world is from many perspectives that I see. But that's what's happening these days. Anything you want to add?
Yeah, I think just in general, doesn't matter what the topic at hand is that you're discussing, but to be informed on it is one thing, but also I think those who know that they're not informed enough, that's when you're at like that next level of knowledge. So I think it takes, that self-recognition to know, hey, I definitely don't know as much as I should on this topic to be able to give as insightful. Like, obviously you can still have an opinion without, you can just hear about it just that day, you'll have an opinion. But, I think there's like a deeper digging, again, regardless of what the topic is, but to have that self-awareness to know, how much do I actually know about this? I mean, you can be talking about, investing in the stock market. Do I know enough to be able to make, should I short this stock or the stock option? Like, you should know your own limitation on whatever the topic at hand is. So I think the self-awareness is kind of universal with that.
Well, I mean, the reason I actually wanted to share this is just because I can see what's happening in the society that we live in today. And this is kind of like a first-hand experience in some ways, but then it's giving me, okay, well, this is what's probably happening for those who are seeing this in a different way. So, but the best way is we live in a time where everything is accessible to us. If you search the right things, internet can be extremely helpful, and it's a huge, powerful tool. Please do so.
It's another skill to have right there too.
Right. So
determine what's reliable.
Especially if you have some, if you are, if you see yourself as an intellectual, and I would see someone who's like a doctor or a lawyer should have a little bit more responsibilities because right. So then they have better. They owe to themselves more in terms of giving their opinions. Before they give their opinions, they have to actually do their own due diligence. Otherwise, you are going to look like a fool and stupid, and you don't want to sound like that. And I hope I will never be in that situation in any time in my life, and we'll try to avoid that. But I know we had a great session with Sarah, and then I know we have a couple of weeks break in the next couple of weeks, and we have two confirmed guests. Our Lieutenant Governor Bethany Holcomb, she's going to be with us, and also Lisa Rochester is going to be also with us in December. And then we are going to finalize the 2023 political series, and after that, we'll see what's going to happen in 2024. Well, thank you for joining us, and until the next time, please stay safe. Have a great weekend.